Hello and welcome to the National Leprechaun Museum's talking series with myself, Mark, and Paudie.
Hello interwebs!
We're out here today doing our talking series, and today we're talking about
The sea.
the sea. I mean, that's not too surprising given the sea is actually behind us.
Yes.
Did you grow up near the sea?
I did. I grew up right on the Shannon estuary there, where the Shannon River meets the sea. Beautiful beaches in that part of the world. Mail Strand, Litter Strand, and of course the world famous Ballybunion.
You should work for the Kerry Tourist Board. All of these videos of you are generally talking about how great Kerry is. Well, this is actually Sandycove that we're at today, and it's about 40 minutes from where I live. So, yeah, it's nice and handy to be able to kind of get away and get near the sea. But it's not necessarily a peaceful, relaxing place when it comes to our stories.
No. Basically, Irish mythological history is about one invasion after the other.
Yeah.
About people coming from across the sea and changing everything in the country when they arrive.
And I suppose if you want to get here, you obviously have to come via the sea, because we live on an island.
We sure do. Now we are.
Okay, so given that we're talking about the sea, I suppose there's an obvious starting point.
And that is Manannan Mac Lir, God King of the Sea. The Isle of Man is named after him. You'll notice the Manannan bit. And he is the son of Lir, from the children of Lir, who was god of the sea before him. Lir came over the sea with his wife Mua, who the province of Munster is named after, like the rest of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the rest of the fairy folk.
But when it came to travelling on the sea, Manannan Mac Lir had a particular mode of transport that I love.
He had a self-navigating boat. So a boat he didn't have to steer, he didn't have to use a rudder or an oar or anything. It travelled all on its own. Yeah.
Technologically very advanced.
Oh yes, way ahead of its time.
He had cruise control on his boat, which is amazing.
Yeah, Scuib Tuina, the wave sweeper, is what the boat was called.
Amazing name.
Yeah. But when he got tired of using the boat, he also had a magical horse, Var, the seahorse.
The white horse.
Yeah, who could travel along the waves. And he often lent out, because he was a very generous king, he often lent out the things that he owned.
Yeah, we see the horse, we see Var popping up in a few more stories.
We do.
Where again, people are whisked off across the sea, normally loving couples.
Yes, and the Niamh Kinor from the story Oisín and Tiernan Og, in some traditions, the horse that she rides is Var, given to her by Manannan Mac Lir. He was the bestower of gifts. He was often giving gifts to the rest of the Tuatha Dé Danann, or to some heroes that had won his favour. Probably the most important is Fragarach, which was a magic sword. And Fragarach made people quake with fear when they were in its presence. It means the answerer, which is the best name for a sword I've ever heard of.
Yeah, you can't lie when it's pointed at you.
Exactly.
But I think that would work with any sword.
Yeah.
Really, if someone's pointing a sword at you, you're most likely going to tell the truth anyway.
Especially if they're a god king and they might be a bit larger than life. Yeah.
So, Paudie, as we referenced earlier on, people coming across the island, across the sea, it wasn't like there was an open invitation, but they were invasions.
Yeah, as we mentioned in the Talking Right to the Source, the Book of Invasions describes Ireland's history as one invasion after the other. The first, as we said, was Césaire and her 49 women. That was followed by the Partholons from Greece, and the connection to Greece and our folklore is quite obvious. Then there was the Numidians, yet another relation of Noah, and the Numidians died off mostly, but those that were left became the Fir Bolg, and the Fir Bolg, the bagmen, those that went around sowing seed from the bags that they had. The Fomorians, then a magical race of gods and monsters, the Titans, arriving from we know not where to rule Ireland with an iron fist for many years, defeating the Fir Bolg and reigning supreme until the arrival of the Tuatha Dé Danann and Balor's defeat at the hands of Lugh. The Tuatha Dé Danann, of course, another invasion afterwards by the Milesians, the very first of what we would call non-magical people.
Yeah.
The humans, the Gaels, arrive from Spain. There's a beautiful town in the north of Spain that's very proud as being the birthplace of the Irish people. And when the Milesians arrived, the Tuatha Dé Danann said to them that this is very unsportsmanlike. We haven't been preparing for an invasion. Is there any chance you would wait offshore, off of what is today Dunleary, a distance of 9 waves offshore? And when the humans, the Milesians, were 9 waves offshore, the fairies threw everything at them. The waves roared up like mountains, and thunder and lightning came down in mighty streams.
Yeah, and in the book Over 9 Waves, which talks about that, it's just this great image. But the story is amazing how they come to an arrangement. It's like, hang on, I'm not quite ready.
Yes, well, the Gaels were a very warlike people, and so it was in their pride, it was in their this idea that they would need to surprise the fairies, they would need to surprise the Tuatha Dé Danann to win.
Yeah.
So to say to the Gaels, well, you couldn't win if you were 9 waves offshore.
Yeah.
They were very proud people.
An amazing imagery in that scene when they're in that story, when they're coming across the sea and they see the depiction of the giant ball,
yes,
or when the
mist,
power of the sea is called up and used against them.
Yes, and Merrow, the chief poet and bard of the Milesians, steps forward into the prow of the boat, and with the beauty of his song and the beauty of his poetry, stills the waves. The waves become like a sheet of glass, and the Milesians easily return to shore.
So, Paudie, there's 2 creatures, characters, I don't know how to describe them really, that stand out in our stories, and the first one being the merrow.
The merrow, the people beneath the waves. In one tradition, not only were the fairies driven under the ground, some of the fairies were driven into the sea. The merrow live beneath the waves, and the women are said to be exceedingly beautiful with long, bright green hair. But the males of the species are said to be hideously ugly. So the merrow women sit on the shore looking for some handsome sailors to lure in.
Yeah, very similar to the sirens in that regard, but they don't seem to be like nasty creatures. I mean, generally the women seem to be minding their own business.
For the most part, yeah, the women sailing was often tough to find a wife if you were a sailor.
I'd imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's tough on land.
Yeah, many of the wife would be spend her nights alone, thinking that maybe her husband wasn't going to come home, and so sailors were often looking desperately for a new wife, and they looked to the merrow women, and the merrow women were often very eager to go with the men, sometimes not so much, depending on the story.
Yeah.
Because the males of the species were pretty nasty.
Yeah.
They were said to be quite. Alcoholism was a bad. You wouldn't think there'd be much alcoholism under the sea, but they were said to, and also to have a pig's face. Like the pig-faced woman of Dublin, but the merrow men were said to have a pig's face and enjoy drinking a bit too much.
And there's 2 particular stories that really show you the differences between the men and the women with regards to the merrow. And I suppose for the women, it's the story of the Lady of Dolores.
The Lady of Dolores, yeah, it's a love story. It's a story about having children. And it's a tragedy, really.
Yeah.
And it's very sad. And often when we tell the story in the museum, people do find themselves a bit weepy afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. It hits home for a lot of people.
And in complete contrast to that, then, of course, you have the story of the soul cages.
The soul cages is a male merrow who keeps the souls of his acquaintances or his sailors in cages beneath the waves. But the souls are freed from the cages by a friend of the merrow who lives on the surface and dives down with him. We should mention as well the fact that they used a magical red cap to breathe underwater. They had no gills. Water was not their natural home in the beginning. They needed a magical red cap to breathe beneath the waves.
Which is similar when you see that idea of a red cap popping up not just with leprechauns traditionally as well, but with other world peoples all across the world.
Yeah.
But it's funny when you look at the soul cages, because when you describe it as like trapping the souls in the cages under the sea, and yet it's a really common story to be told to children.
Yes.
There's a way to play with that story to make it quite light and funny almost, but you don't get that with Lady Dollars.
Yeah, because the friend or the gentleman who finds himself meeting the male merrow is invited to party. He's invited to drink poachine at the bottom of the sea, and he has a lovely time down there. It's all very beautiful, the kingdom beneath the waves.
Yeah, that's the great thing about being a storyteller, is you can take these stories and you can adapt them and change them completely depending on your audience.
Exactly.
As long as the bare bones are still there.
Of course, far to the north, then we have the selkies.
Yeah, a very different creature.
If you've ever seen the movie The Song of the Sea, it's a beautiful movie. I recommend it. Selkies are seal people. They wear a seal's coat and almost transform into a seal and embody a seal, but they live beneath the water.
There's some great modern stuff around it. Like I say, Song of the Sea, you absolutely have to check out. It's an amazing movie. But you also have, like, there's a great book called Tides by Betsy Cornwall, which is a classic kind of Celtic story. And we see this mechanic of them coming out from the sea at night under the moonlight and disrobing from their seal skins and dancing on the beaches. And of course, you then always have a gentleman walking late at night who sees them, instantly falls in love, Paudie, because that's how it happens.
Exactly.
And steals away one of the seal coats so she can't return to the water.
So maybe if you're a single man, try walking along a beach sometime.
There's other stories though as well, like seals. Obviously the sea is such a magical land. It holds treasures, it holds mystery. And living on an island, of course, a lot of our stories are going to be born out of the sea. But with seals being unusual creatures, and I think in their mannerisms as well, they're quite curious. They have a lot of kind of human attributes. So
they do.
They're going to lend themselves to some great stories, like the Selkie stories, but also there's a great story called The Island of the Lonely Seals, where it's about a village of people who live on this island they disturb fairyland and they're cursed and they're transformed into seals. And of course we don't realise this when new settlers come and start essentially farming the seals and eating them until they discover they're the previous inhabitants.
But it's a kind of cannibalism.
Yeah, it's kind of cannibalism. But again, the sea just holds so many mysteries.
So many mysteries.
So it's one thing, Paudie, to be on the land and looking out towards the sea, but at some point that journey has to begin where you travel out into the waves.
Yes, and every culture has that Odyssey myth, that travelling out across the sea, charting new territory. Ireland is lucky enough to have three famous Odyssey myths. There's the voyage of Bran. Bran is a king, but he's in much need of a wife. So he follows a magical maiden out across the sea. But a little bit like in the story of Oisin and Tiernan Og, when he and his people come back to Ireland, they find that they can't step foot on shore without aging terribly. There's the voyage of Maelduin as well. Maelduin is setting out looking for revenge. That's quite a dark tale. You might hear it on one of our Darkland tours. And there is, of course, the voyage of Brendan the Navigator. Brendan goes out perhaps seeking to spread Christianity on the other side of the Atlantic. He meets monsters and he comes to a beautiful land called High Brazil, which some people claim he travelled along the Mississippi River.
Which is quite a claim, but of course people make that connection between the name High Brazil and Brazil.
Yes.
Which has no founding in the truth whatsoever. It's just a coincidence.
No, it's a complete coincidence, yeah.
But coincidences make for amazing stories.
They sure do. There's the famous passage in the story where they stop on what they think is an island, very strange island though, the monks, and they light a fire on the top of the island, only for the island to begin to move, and they realise that they have lit their fire on the back of an enormous whale.
Not unusual, I'd say. Even now, looking out into the sea and seeing all the boats in the species, anything could be a landmass.
Anything.
An understandable mistake to make, until you get too close, and then you have to wonder how they didn't cop to it.
Yes, and how the whale waited until the fire was lit to move.
So, Paudie, we mentioned High Brazil as an island, but we can't talk about journeying out, into the sea without mentioning Tir na Nog.
Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth. Tir na Nog comes up in a couple of stories. I mentioned the voyage of Bran already, but obviously the most famous story with Tir na Nog is Oisin in the land of eternal youth. Oisin is the son of Finn McCool, and he is invited by a beautiful woman to come and live with her in her magical kingdom where no one ever grows old and no one is ever hungry and no one is ever sad. But one day Oisin gets a little bit homesick and he decides that he wants to visit his father and his friends. He thinks he's only been away for about 3 years, but when he returns to Ireland he finds that he's been gone for 300 years, that everything has changed, that Finn McCool is only a myth. And with his superhuman strength, he tries to help some men lift a boulder out of the ground, but the strap in his saddle broke. He fell to the ground and aged instantly 300 years, becoming a very old man. He lived just long enough to tell St. Patrick his story.
Yeah. So going out to the islands like that is one thing, and we can understand those as being things that happened. And of course the stories change over time. But this is where it gets strange, where we actually travel beneath the waves.
Yes, in many of the stories there is a kingdom beneath the waves. My favourite story about a kingdom beneath the waves is, of course, Diarmid Ó Divna and the kingdom beneath the waves. One night a hag turns up at the door to Na Fianna, and she asks to be let sleep under the blanket of any of these fine warriors. All of the men turn her down except for Diarmid Ó Divna, who was very generous. But of course the hag turns into a beautiful woman who is from the kingdom under the waves. Now Diarmid has 9 greyhounds, and he he also has a number of, well, we'll say business trips that he has to go to.
Yeah.
And every time Diarmid goes on one of his business trips, one of his friends turns up looking for one of his greyhound puppies. And of course the wife, being very generous, gives away all the greyhound puppies. But every time Diarmid comes home, he tells her, do you not remember who you were when you met me? You were an old hag. And she gets tired of this, returns to the kingdom under the waves, at which point Diarmid realises that he loved her very much, and he follows her down into a beautiful kingdom. I love the scene where the boat is descending beneath the waves and the bottom of the sea is laid out like a farm before him.
Rolling fields, and the land divided up. It seems to be like a farming kind of people as well,
exactly.
all at the bottom of the sea.
It's and of course we can't mention the bottom of the sea without, of course, the leprechauns. Now you might be thinking, Paudie, what are you talking about?
How are we bringing leprechauns into this?
Well, in the very early manuscript, the lucre pawn, the small bodies, the leprechauns, were described as water sprites that lived at the bottom of the sea. Of course, as well, in the epic of Fergus Mac Lir, the very first leprechaun story, Fergus is given the ability to breathe underwater.
And we see that's quite similar because the lucre pawn give him these shoes that they can wear to breathe underwater.
Exactly.
And you'd imagine that being quite similar to the cap worn by the merrow, which allows to breathe in the water, suggesting that they didn't originally come from under the sea, maybe themselves.
Maybe they're hiding from they are quite small, maybe they're hiding from a foe beneath the waves. But you're exactly right, just like the merrow, they need a magical piece of clothing to breathe under the water.
So, Paudie, we see in the epic saga of the death of King Fergus Mac Lir the introduction of the lucre pawn, or the leprechaun, and it's believed to be the first written account that we've discovered anyway of leprechaun stories. But it also introduces us to an incredible sea monster.
The Moordish.
Yeah.
It's said to be the ugliest thing that has ever lived. Its mouth was so full of fangs that its jaw was bent all the way back to its back. So really really hideous. If you've ever seen those angler fish
Yeah.
from the bottom of the sea, it would have looked a little bit like that, except much bigger. And it was so ugly that when you saw it, you began to scream. And you screamed so much that your face became frozen in a rictus of pain, fear, and agony.
It's amazing. It's just an incredible creature for a storyteller to play with.
Yes.
I've listened to you tell that story so many times in the museum, where it was 99% teeth.
Yeah.
Or in my own description of it, his mouth would open so wide, his face would lay flat on its back. It's an absolute dream of a creature to deal with.
Yes.
But it's not the only sea monster that we have.
Oh, not by a long shot. The paste, with some people think of the paste being confined to lakes and rivers, of course. But you have the ollie fish, the great serpent, which could be living beneath the waves as well. When St. Patrick defeated the giant paste at Loch Derg, that paste ran away down the Shannon out into the waves as well.
There's another great story from the other side of the country, from over in Galway Bay, about the young man who sets off to find his place in the world. And he ends up being gifted, having defeated 3 giants, gifted these magical items, a suit of armour, a sword that never failed, and a black horse that ran so swiftly. And of course he hears about a princess being tied to a throne on the beach, and everyone watching to see this great creature come out of the sea to eat her. But of course he makes his way down and he cuts off its wings as it comes up out of the sea. So again, the sea, being an island people, gives us so much fantasy.
It does. It fills our imagination, and it looms large in our psychic imaginary. Irish people will sometimes say that they miss the sea, that they want to see it again, even if you're from the Midlands. And there have been numerous sightings of Nessie type creatures as well beneath the waves, but out in the sea rather than in a lake. Off the coast of Kilrush in County Clare in 1844, there was a sighting of a Nessie type creature, and it made it all the ways to the Times of London, where it was reported.
Yeah.
This famous sighting.
I think as well we have to acknowledge some of the greatest storytellers in the world are fishermen.
Exactly.
It is in their DNA to play with the truth.
It sure is, yeah.
Whether that is the size of the fish or the creature that rocked their boat.
And the original Nessie has an Irish connection as well, being the creature that was defeated by St. Columba.
And an awful lot of these lake creatures, and I know we're talking about the sea, but people believe that they haven't been discovered or caught because of underground networks.
Yes.
Underground networks which connects them to the sea,
Yeah.
which allows us to make them relevant in this video.
Yes.
So guys, thank you so much for joining Paudie and myself for Talking Sea. Before we go, we just say that, that we've mentioned a few stories in this that we really think you should check out.
Yes, and I really love, now a lot of people don't like T. Crofton Croker, but I really love the original Lady of Gallerus, where he describes her green hair as like butter melting on cabbage where the sun is lighting the green hair. I think that is the best version of the Lady of Gallerus to read. And of course we mentioned Mary Heaney's Over 9 Waves, good mythological history of Ireland. Pick it up.
For me, 2 stories that I'd recommend is, one is The Island of Lonely Seals. Please go and check out that story. And a great modern book, Tides by Betsy Cornwell, is amazing in terms of giving you a beautiful, romantic, tragic selkie story.
And the Voyage of Bran will be available in Over 9 Waves as well.
And of course, if you're ever visiting the zine, and we hope that you do, don't be afraid to ask us. If you want to know anything more about a particular subject, like when we're talking about the sea. You'll see in all of our talking videos we cover different topics, but always ask us. That's what we're there for, and we can't wait to tell you stories.
It was a real pleasure.
Goodbye.